Hello and welcome to episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Friday, August 4th. Hope everyone's having a good day so far and a good rest of their day yesterday. We've got a lot to get into today on a Friday program. It is Friday, August 4th here today. We have hit the end of the week. Tomorrow is the weekend, and we've got a lot going on in the world of sports. There was a football game last night. The New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns, first preseason game for the NFL preseason. And now up until February, we will have football all week long, the rest of August into September, and obviously the entire regular season. So super, super excited. Definitely looking forward to the football season as it continues to get closer. We'll get into last night's game. We'll get into my takeaways, break down everything that took place in last night's Jets-Brown games. Browns took the victory 21-16, but obviously victories, wins, and losses do not mean a single thing. The biggest thing is health. Players come out of these games healthy, and the biggest thing is if you see some positives from the guys that you're looking at and from the guys that you want to see do well. So we'll give you my takeaways later on. I want to start today, though, with a little bit of baseball. The New York Mets, we've talked about them a lot. We've talked about them basically all week, and even last week, exactly a week ago today, we were talking about the David Robertson trade to the Miami Marlins and the potential of a Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander trade. And now we sit a week later. The New York Mets just got swept by the Kansas City Royals over the last couple days this week in Kansas City. They will now face Baltimore. But what exactly, after Justin Verlander has now spoke, Max Scherzer has now spoke, he made his first start for the Texas Rangers. Verlander will get his first start back with Houston tomorrow in the Bronx against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. What is the Mets' plan moving forward? Steve Cohen spoke. Billy Epler has now spoke a couple times. What are the Mets going to do in 2024? What should Mets fans expect out of Steve Cohen and this front office in 2024? So I want to open with that today. I also want to comment on the dysfunction of the New York Yankees. More of that, because Anthony Rizzo, the way they handled the Rizzo injury was just beyond atrocious. I mean, it is embarrassing the way the Yankees handled Anthony Rizzo the last 2 months. Basically let him go out there with a concussion and letting him fail out there, and then now saying, concussion stems back to the Fernando Tatis incident that happened all the way back in May. What is the Yankees' problem? So I also want to touch on that as well. We'll talk a little Yankees-Mets, and then we'll get to the Jets-Browns game last night. Football. It was football. Yankees did get the win, but it was football. It was finally good to watch football. It took your mind off of baseball for a little bit because the baseball teams have been so dreadful. Even with the Yankees winning 2 straight games, I still have no hope. They got to go on a long win streak. None of this, 2 of 3. For me to gain trust in this Yankee team, for me to start believing again, this Yankee team's got to win like 7, 8 in a row. They got to go on some type of tear. None of this, we won a game here, we lose 3 straight, win another game. No, these 1-2 game win streaks are not going to get me to buy back into me believing in this team. I'll still watch, but I don't believe in this team. Until they show me otherwise, I still don't believe. And what happened yesterday was ridiculous with the Anthony Rizzo situation. So we'll get to that here to start. I'll also get you ready for game 1 of the 3-game set, Mets-Orioles tonight, and game 2 of a 4-game set, Yankees-Astros back at Yankee Stadium. Yankees with the 4-3 victory last night. They'll get Verlander tomorrow at Yankee Stadium. So we'll see how all that plays out tomorrow. All right, so we got to start today with a little bit of baseball. Yankees-Mets. Obviously, we'll get to football here a little bit later on. Jets-Browns last night. Finally, some preseason action, as I mentioned. But I want to start here. We'll get into the Mets here in a second. But I want to just start quickly here with the Anthony Rizzo stuff yesterday. So Anthony Rizzo has obviously had an awful last 2 months of the season. The month of June and the month of July for him were terrible. Just to give you his numbers, he hit 173 in the month of June. He hit 167 in the month of July. So he actually got worse in the month of July, and so far this month in August, it hasn't been good. And this dates back to the 3-game set against the San Diego Padres where the Yankees took 2 of 3, and they were feeling good, finished up a good month of May, and Anthony Rizzo, in that 3rd game, got hit by Fernando Tatis on a play back at first base. It was a pickoff attempt. Anthony Rizzo went for the ball. Tatis came in. His leg nailed Anthony Rizzo right in the head because Anthony Rizzo was like this. And the Yankees labeled it as a neck injury. Now, if you remember correctly, after that, the Yankees went on a West Coast trip. 3 in Seattle, 3 in LA before coming back home to play the White Sox. That's when all the smoke stuff happened where the air wasn't good. The game got postponed. That's after Judge got hurt. All that stuff. He missed those 3 games in Seattle because of what happened with the Fernando Tatis issue. Yankees said he's fine. They ran him through tests. They said he's okay. They said it was just a neck injury. He'll be all right with a couple days rest. And sure enough, he was back out there against the Dodgers that Friday, less than a week after the Tatis injury. He missed the 3 games in Seattle, and he was back out there in LA for the 3-game series against the Dodgers. This was all taking place. The injury took place on May 28th, and he returned after a 3-game hiatus or a 3-game break on June 2nd. It is now August 4th. We are a full 2 months and 2 days removed from that first game back against the Dodgers. We are now, yesterday was actually 2 months and a day removed when they officially put him on the IL. And now the Yankees say, oh, he has a concussion. And they're tracing it back to the Fernando Tatis incident, where I think everybody in America, if they watched that video, would say, yeah, he probably got a concussion from that play. And now the Yankees are just figuring it out. And they've let him play through it. He's reported that he's been feeling some fogginess. He's reported that he's been feeling a little bit more tired. They've kind of attributed it to the grind of the season. But now what you've done to an athlete, it's just unacceptable. I mean, they let Anthony Rizzo go out there basically for 2 straight months. He was playing like garbage, but now we know why, because he was basically playing concussed for 2 months. It hasn't gotten any better. It's probably gotten worse. And now they put him on the IL, and they say he's week to week. I mean, that's so just pathetic by the Yankees. And the irony of this all is the Yankees talk about keeping their players safe. They talk about, Aaron Boone always goes in his stupid press conferences and rattles off all this dumb garbage that he has to say. And he's always like, Aaron Judge, the other day, in the press conference, he had an interview with the Talking Yanks, John Boy and Jake and the stuff, and they were like, oh, why did you rest Aaron Judge? He's like, oh, it's Aaron Judge. I'm going to protect the player. Handing out all these rest days, taking guys off their feet, making sure that these guys are all healthy. And yet when somebody's actually injured, they don't realize it, and they just keep playing them. Jose Trevino, 2 weeks ago, found it out, I need surgery. It's been bothering him since spring training. Boone was aware, but they wanted him to just push through it. And now Anthony Rizzo has had a concussion for the last 2 months, or at least has developed a concussion from not taking the time off from something that is stemmed from an incident that happened on May 28th. It's August 4th, folks. It's August 4th. This incident happened on May 28th. I mean, you realize how long of a time period that is? I mean, this isn't like something that happened over the weekend in Baltimore. This happened against the Padres at Yankee Stadium on May 28th. I mean, that's just how crazy and just negligent the Yankees are. Just letting him go out there, not produce, and just keep rolling him out there every single day. And again, there's an obvious disconnect between Aaron Boone and this locker room. Just another example of how bad this organization, or how bad of a spot this organization is in. With another injury debacle, another mishandling of an injury. But yet they'll talk about how they want to rest all these guys and keep all these guys healthy. We're going to put Judge at DH so he can get off his feet. Stanton, they've talked about pinch running for him so he can get off his feet. We're only going to play him in outfield in the certain days because we don't want him on his legs and we don't want him pulling a hamstring. But yet when a guy's actually hurt, they have no clue. I mean, how just pathetic is that? I mean, this is Yankees baseball. This is the New York Yankees organization, folks. This is where we are. Sit, do nothing at the trade deadline. Watch the team go up in flames. Roll out the same garbage lineup every night. And oh yeah, a guy that's got a head injury, which is serious, let's just keep rolling him out there. Even though he's reported problems and he's said that, he was feeling more tired, fogginess, and let's just keep rolling him out there. I mean, how just, it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Again, I don't know what more of incompetence Aaron Boone, Brian Cashman, even Hal Steinbrenner have to show to the fan base about how, for somebody that maybe still believes in this team to finally wake up and realize that this team stinks. This organization's in a terrible spot, and it's not going to get any better until Hal Steinbrenner, number one, wakes up, and Hal Steinbrenner actually makes changes, and those changes are major. I'm not talking about a little change here and there. I'm talking about fully blowing this thing up. But don't worry, they won 2 straight games, so they're back on the right track. Don't worry, everybody. They'll probably lose the next 3 games, and they'll be right back to the drawing board. 3.5, 4 games out. Don't worry, it'll happen. It's Yankees baseball. Sevy on the mound tonight. He's probably good to let up about 7 runs, so the whole world can see on Apple TV Plus, which I don't know why the games are on there, but they are. So it's just another example of the new low the Yankees are at. That's the new low now. Playing guys with head injuries, playing guys with concussions. That's where we've gotten to with this Yankee team. So I just wanted to start with that because I couldn't obviously let that go. I know it's been a whole lot of Yankee rants on this show. I understand. But, I mean, it's one of the big stories. It's one of the biggest name franchises in sports. Obviously, as a diehard Yankee fan, got to get the opinion out there. And it's just another example of the Yankees just not, they're just incompetent. They're incompetent. I'll leave it at that. So we move on here to the other team in New York. Go to Queens here to Citi Field and the New York Mets. They're fresh off of a really tough series against the Kansas City Royals where they lost 3 straight games. They'll be in Baltimore tonight for another interleague play against the Baltimore Orioles, who obviously currently lead the division in the American League East, up on top of the Tampa Bay Rays by 2 games. They are 67 and 42. And the Mets coming out of their series over the past couple days against the Kansas City Royals, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it was pathetic performances. They lost on Tuesday on a walk-off balk. They got crushed on Wednesday, and they got crushed on Thursday, or yesterday, I should say, 9-2. They get swept in Kansas City. Carrasco didn't pitch good today. Bad outing. Mets overall are just bad. Their record currently sits at 50-58, 20 games out of first. We know that the wild card standings really don't mean anything anymore because they're not going for a wild card. They're 7.5 back of a wild card right now. So the Mets are done. We all know that. It's over. Now you shift your focus to 2024. And they're fresh off of a deadline where they traded away David Robertson, they traded away Max Scherzer, traded away Mark Hanna, traded away Justin Verlander, traded away Tommy Pham, and traded away Dominic Leone. So they traded away 6 guys, all 6 of them veterans. All of them, David Robertson played a big role. Mark Hanna was supposed to play a big role. Scherzer and Verlander were supposed to be your big 1-2 punch. So if you went into the beginning of this year and said by August 4th, if you would have told me August 4th, I'd be talking about the New York Mets plan for 2024, I would have thought you were crazy. I thought the Mets had a great shot at winning the division. I thought the Mets had a good shot at winning World Series. I actually thought the Mets had a better shot of winning a championship this year than the New York Yankees because I thought on paper going into the year, the Mets had a better roster. And I think a lot of people could have agreed with me. They did a lot more than the Yankees. The Yankees didn't do a whole lot in the offseason other than add Rodon and call up Volpe. Other than that, it's basically the same lineup that got swept in the ALCS, and unfortunately, we're starting to see that. With the Mets, on the other hand, I don't think I would have believed you. I would have been having this conversation right now about where this organization is headed. But Steve Cohen spoke the other day in Kansas City once the deadline concluded on Tuesday, after the 6 Eastern deadline, and talked about kind of the plan. And we heard this from Billy Epler. We also heard it from Max Scherzer, and we've also heard it from Justin Verlander, as the plan seems to be the Mets don't fully plan on contending in 2024, but they also aren't one of those teams where they're probably going to lose 100 games and be one of the worst teams in baseball where they're going to completely tear it down. It really seems as if they're going to use it as a retool year. That's what it seems like. But then you hear other reports that Steve Cohen still wants to win next year with a new look roster, maybe not spend as much, rely more on the young guys, but his goal is to still win and still get into the postseason. So it's like there's conflicting reports. And it's funny because this all kind of started when Max Scherzer talked about how Billy Epler told him the Mets don't plan on contending until 2025, 2026. Next year they're using as like a retool year. And everyone's like, oh, how much do you believe of Max Scherzer? The way it ended was ugly. He talked about after the Robertson trade, he wanted to talk to Mets brass. How much of that was actually Max Scherzer being frustrated, and how much of that was Max Scherzer actually having conversations with Billy Epler, with Steve Cohen, and with the Mets front office? So you hear that. Then you hear Epler speak and talking about how they're not tearing it all down. They're not. This isn't a blow it up. This isn't a complete sell. Kind of hinting towards this is more of a retool, which is what we've wanted the Yankees to do, or at least I did, and many other fans wanted, but they didn't. Ownership, Cashman, all involved in that. We know the dysfunction. I don't have to talk about it. But the Mets took that path. Then you hear Steve Cohen speak, and what he had to say was, again, it seems as if next year they're not, they're going to try to scale back potentially on the amount of money they're going to spend in the offseason of this upcoming offseason of this upcoming year, the 2023-2024 offseason. But their plan is to still contend. Like, they're not going to blow this thing up and go full on rebuild. It's going to be used as a retool year. In a retool year, you can still kind of contend. You can go into the season and look at a potentially third wild card spot. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose 100 plus games. It means you're probably going to go with a little bit more youth, not spend as much in free agent, not have the highest payroll in baseball, but you'll still have some talent. You might make some acquisitions here and there, but it's really the year after that you're shooting for. It's setting you up for that next season. A retool year isn't a 4 or 5 year rebuild like the Baltimore Orioles did, or like the Washington Nationals are in right now, or whatever the Oakland A's are trying to do, right? A retool year is kind of a 1 year reset. You could still be competitive, maybe not playoffs, but competitive, and then set up 2025. You also heard Justin Verlander's comments, and I think that was the big confirming thing, that it doesn't seem like they're going to contend in 2024. But here's the thing, and this is my view on it, is I don't see a world where, and who knows what's going to happen with Shohei Ohtani. He's obviously the biggest name, but Shohei Ohtani, let's say, all right, he's a free agent, and let's say the Angels are out of the question. Like, he's not going back to the Angels. He's moving on, going somewhere else. Let's say that's the case. I don't know. I still can't. I could still see a possibility, a potential opportunity where Steve Cohen, who still has some of the deepest pockets in all of baseball, can still potentially go out and get a Shohei Ohtani. I can still see that happening. Now, outside of Shohei Ohtani, this upcoming free agent class isn't the most stacked class ever. The year after, there's definitely some names. There's a couple Cy Young guys there. There's a couple guys that could completely change the trajectory of the Mets rotation. One thing's for certain, though, whatever the Mets decide to do in the offseason, they've got to bring in some pitching. Is that Ohtani? Or do they settle for somebody else? Or do they kind of stay put? Because the Mets rotation right now is in a really tough spot. It's Kodai Senga and Jose Quintana. Carrasco's a free agent at the end of the year. Obviously, no more Scherzer, no more Verlander. Your rotation is those two guys, and your 3, 4, 5 is a bunch of question marks. Is it David Peterson? Is it Tyler McGill? You can't rely on David Peterson and Tyler McGill to give you 27 starts and be reliable and give you a mid-3 ERA. You can't rely on them to do that. A spot start here and there, but you can't plug those guys into your 3, 4, 5. So pitching is a need. I still wouldn't be shocked if they go out and get an Ohtani. But I also wouldn't be shocked if they kind of stay put. Again, this was the right thing for the Mets to do. This deadline was very smart by the New York Mets, and they are in a better position today set up for the future than for moving forward than if they would have stayed put or even if they would have bought at the deadline and tried to make a massive jump to 6 games up and get into a wild card and make a run in the postseason. They got better. They restocked the farm. They got better for the future. Drew Gilbert's estimated time of arrival, the best prospect, one of the top prospects they got, the top prospect in the Astros organization that they got for Verlander is 2025. Do the Mets approach it as that? Don't spend big next year, call up Gilbert 2025, make some other big signings and go all in on there? I could definitely see that being the case. But I think if you're a Mets fan, you have to understand the Mets are in a better position today for the future than they were, I should say, just a week ago before they made that David Robertson trade. Before the deadline. Because they realized they weren't going anywhere. They recognized they have pieces that teams would be interested in. Let's sell off, bring in younger pieces, restock the farm, something Steve Cohen has wanted to do, reset, use next year as a retool year, and come back and go all in 2025. And that's okay. Because let's look at the free agents this year. Now, you want to pick up a pitcher this offseason, there are some names. Like Julio Urias is available. He's had a little bit of a rough season, but he back-to-back years, he had an ERA in the 2s. He was one of the best pitchers in baseball the last 2 seasons. This year, dealt with injury. He's had a little bit of a rocky year. When he's healthy, though, he's a very solid pitcher. He can be an ace of a staff. Julio Urias, do you go after him? Blake Snell's available. Sonny Gray, I don't see that happening. Kershaw's available. I don't see Kershaw happening. Giolito, just some of the names that I pulled from the 2023-2024 free agent class. Now, when you look at, and this, I was looking ahead. When you look at 2024-2025 free agent class, that's where the Mets could do some big-time spending. That's where Steve Cohen can reach back into his deep pockets, as deep as anyone in baseball, and make some moves. Here are the free agent pitchers, just some of them, in 2024-2025 offseason after next year. And I know this is looking ahead. Extensions, contract, things can change. This is looking a whole year ahead. But Corbin Burns, Shane Bieber, Walker Buehler, Max Fried, Tyler Glasnow. I mean, all of those guys could headline a rotation that can go deep in the postseason. Corbin Burns is a Cy Young winner. Max Fried's one of the better young pitchers in all of baseball. Shane Bieber has had a very successful career. Garrett Cole's not going to the Mets. He was the other guy. I know some of you might be saying, oh, Garrett Cole. He's not going to the Mets. And either way, it's something else. It's like an opt-out. But I know some fans, I could tell some fans are going to come say, oh, you missed the guy that's available. I know Cole's available. He's not going to the Mets. It's not happening. But a Corbin Burns, do you go after him? That's next season. Do you retool this year? Don't go after Ohtani, which I still could see them going after Ohtani. But let's say they don't. Retool. And then not so much, don't just buy your way to a championship, because Steve Cohen has talked about it. Sustained winning isn't by spending a ton of money. He's mentioned this so many times. You want to have sustained winning. You want to win every year. You want to be in the conversation to win a championship every single season. You got to do it through the farm system. That's ultimately what separates good organizations and great organizations. Organizations that can build through the farm system. Like, I'll use an example. Atlanta Braves and the New York Yankees. Like, the Braves are a well-run championship contender every season. They built up through the farm. Sure, they've had free agent signings, Matt Olson being one of the prime ones. But they've also built up through the farm. They've built up through young talent. They've got their talent locked up for a very long time. You look at the Yankees, they're rolling with a bunch of old guys every year, trying to make it work, trying to hope a former MVP and Josh Donaldson 8 years ago can regain his 8 years ago swing. That separates the difference between good and poor run organizations. The Mets, under Steve Cohen, understand building through the farm along with spending some money is the right thing to do. Having the highest payroll in baseball obviously didn't work out. You got prospects for it. Those prospects should be ready next year and the year after. Bring those guys up. Who knows what's going to happen with Pete Alonso, but bring them up. You have other guys on this team. You already have Francisco Alvarez who's up. Maybe go after 2 years from now. Let's just hypothetically say you bring in ace of a rotation like a Corbin Burns, and then you're ready to win in 2025. It's okay to use next year as a retool year. I understand Mets fans are sick of losing, but a retool year next year could set up 5, 6, 7 years of just sustained winning because of the farm. You give young guys opportunities. You don't spend a ton of money again. You don't spend, you don't have the highest payroll in baseball again and have to sell it all off at the end of the season. You don't have to you don't have to take a risk on guys at 38 and 39 years old like you did on Verlander and Max Scherzer. And you reset. And don't forget, you also get Edwin Diaz back. So you have Diaz back next season and the year after, if he stays healthy, which I think a lot of people forget that he's a big piece, a big cog to the Mets roster. The Mets are doing this thing right. I believe that. And I know Mets fans are upset with the way it ended, but this offseason's free agent class isn't fantastic. Sure, there's Bellinger's available. Sure, you have J.D. Martinez, who I know the Mets took a look at last year. You have Teoscar Hernandez, some guys like that, sure. But those guys aren't going to put you over the top. It wouldn't be right for the Mets. And I think this is their thought process too. And trades can always happen, obviously. But it wouldn't make sense for the Mets to go out and spend a ton of money this year in free agency because none of these guys outside of Shohei Ohtani, he's the one big guy. If you get Shohei, that's awesome, obviously, right? Pitcher and hitter. But outside of him, the free agent classes it's nothing to love. Cody Bellinger is very good. But, is it, how much money is he going to want after a year where he hit over 300? If he continues that, does he go back to the Cubs? You'll have probably, maybe you'll have a team like I don't know what the heck the Yankees are going to do. I don't even know. I got to stop talking about the Yankees. I don't know what they're going to do in the offseason. But none of these guys on the list, another guy available, Harrison Bader. You're not going to sign Harrison Bader. You're not going to bring you over the top. Might as well use this year as a retool year, 2024-2025 class, especially in the pitching market, is a lot better. That's when you spend your money, mix it in with the young guys, and that's when you make a run. And that's when you revamp. And that's when you reset. So I think the Mets have the right plan. And I think truly their plan is, retool. I still wouldn't be shocked, as I mentioned, I still wouldn't be shocked if they go after Shohei Ohtani. I wouldn't be shocked. You bring in Ohtani. Now, here's the thing, though. Ohtani wants to win. Is Ohtani going to be okay with sitting through a retool year? Now, look, you get Ohtani, you have your ace, and you have your top hitter. You kill two birds with one stone. You solve two problems at once. That's what makes Ohtani so special. Then maybe you want to go out and sign a Julio Urias. All right, now your pitching staff's set. You hope that McNeil, again, McNeil, even if he's just, McNeil, he can't be this bad, right? Next year, you assume he's got to be better. Lindor is quite not the same player he once was, but you like his defense, obviously. You still like his leadership. Lindor's still going to be in that middle of the lineup, and he can still do some damage. Alonso's a power hitter. He's just a pure power hitter. That's what you're going to get at Pete Alonso. You need a little bit more contact. You have Alvarez entering your second season. I think really the biggest thing with the Mets is, and they could use definitely some outfield help, but is their pitching. Their rotation next season is ugly. They will have to sign a pitcher. They're going to have to bring in somebody, whether that's a bigger name like Julio Urias, who's probably outside of Shohei the biggest name on the pitching market, whether that's somebody like that or whether it's a smaller name, you want to bring in a rental Lucas Giolito. I know he had a really bad start the other day, but you want to bring in a guy like that, bring in a mid-3 RA guy to just kind of be a stopgap for the year and then go after a Corbin Burns or a Shane Bieber next offseason, you can do that. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how Mets approach it, but the retool year is, I think, also maybe what Cohen wants. And Steve Cohen has stuck to his word. He said at the beginning of all this, and you got to give him credit, too, because I'm sure it wasn't easy to move on from all the investments. I mean, this is the guy that poured so much money into this Mets team this past season. I mean, as we mentioned, Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer alone, $40 million a year. He had to move on from those guys. So, from Steve Cohen's perspective, too, when you look back on what he said back in June, that was one thing to say it in June when he said anything's on the table. It's another thing to actually put that into action and say, you know what, sell. It takes a lot out of a guy. Like, you look at the Yankees. The Yankees, unfortunately, they're too selfish to sell. They think they're doing everything right, and they're not. The Mets realized it could have been very easy for Steve Cohen to say, no, these guys I paid all this money for, we've got to keep them on this roster. We can't move on from them. And just ride this out and set themselves further back. Instead, now, they're set up better for the future. So, just more of my thoughts on what the Mets did and why I think they did a very good job and why I think Mets fans, I know, the Wilpon comparisons, which I don't think are fair. I understand where people are coming from being cheap and punting on a season next year, but I think people have to realize, like, the Mets next season, they aren't going to lose 100 games. They're not going to be, what was it, 2018 Mets? Was it the 2018 Mets where they stunk? They won, like, barely 70 games. They're not going to be that bad. They're not going to be a 65-win team next year. They probably will be around maybe a 500 ball club. They'll probably be about average. They'll be competitive. They're not going to be as bad as the Wilpon teams. And everybody that's saying, oh, Steve Cohen's never going to get this thing right. The Mets got to a World Series under the Wilpons back in 2015. I know that was a little bit of a weird season where nobody really thought they would get to a World Series, whatever. But they got to a World Series without really much structure, without really much plan. They kind of just got there. And then the next year they got to the wild card and lost to the San Francisco Giants, and that was the end of it. Steve Cohen's actually building this thing from the ground up. He actually understands what it's going to take. There's no way that as long as Steve Cohen's the Mets owner, they don't get to at least one World Series. They got to a World Series with the Wilpons. There's no way they don't get to a World Series with Steve Cohen, or at least get close with Steve Cohen. His 3-year World Series window might be out of the equation, but don't count the Mets out in the next 2 seasons once they retool, bring up some young talent, and build with more money. The Mets plan's fine. So that's what I've got for the New York Mets and the New York baseball in general, with the Yankees and the Rizzo debacle and just about everything else. So anyway, there was a football game last night as we move on here from the Diamond, moving on over to the Gridiron now. There was a football game last night. Jets-Browns Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio. Browns got the win 21-16. It was a lot of fun just to watch football. I always say it. Like, preseason, the games aren't great, I'll admit. And I did a full recap on this yesterday, or this morning, actually, a little while before I record this. My In the Trench with Gang Green podcast, talking about the game last night, recapping everything from the game last night, and my biggest takeaway. So I'll kind of do the same here. If you want to get a really in-depth look at everything that took place, take a look at my In the Trench with Gang Green podcast on Apple Podcasts. Definitely appreciate that if you could. But yeah, 21-16 Browns win. Wasn't the best game ever. But just watching football. And again, it kind of took me away a little bit from the baseball debacle that is the Yankees. I know they won last night. But again, it still is a debacle of a season. And there was terrible news that took place earlier in the day revolving around Rizzo that just made you question its organization even more. So it was nice to get some football, nice to take mind off of some things. It was cool to see Rodgers on the sideline with the headset on. Still doesn't feel real. I keep saying that. I don't quite know when it's going to feel real because it still doesn't feel real. Like, I was sitting there last night. I've never been so invested into a sideline interview during a preseason game in the second quarter. Like, I've never been. I know they usually do them, especially during the preseason. Like, I remember, I think it was last year where they interview him. I forget exactly who. They always interview him, especially once the games got on, like, local TV. I never was that. Like, I was so excited. Like, I was watching Rodgers. I was, like, so pumped up. I'm like, it's second quarter of a preseason game. I'm like, yeah, I'm watching Aaron Rodgers in a Jets hat, Jets t-shirt, on the sideline calling plays. Zach Wilson actually said in the post-game press conference, Aaron Rodgers actually called that play, 57-yard pass, dime to Malik Taylor. He actually called that. And Zach executed. And we'll get to Zach here in a second. But it still doesn't feel real Rodgers is here. Like, it still doesn't. And I was at practice last Thursday, and it still didn't feel real even then. Again, probably when it's going to sink in, I still say this, it might actually, it's probably going to sink in. I mean, this whole season might not feel real. If the Jets win 13 games and go on and make some crazy run, and hypothetically, let's say they win the Super Bowl, this entire year is just going to feel like a giant dream. It's going to go like that. It's going to go as quick as a snap, number one. It's probably going to go so fast. They're going to win a championship. You're going to be there at the parade, and you're going to be like, what just happened? Like, the Jets just won the Super Bowl. I'm just dreaming at this point. But it still doesn't feel real to see Rodgers on the sideline. Maybe when it does, when the time will probably finally sink in is probably when he takes the field on Monday night against the Bills and gets a true New York Jets ovation by the crowd at MetLife Monday night, 9/11. Place is going to be rocking. Emotions will be high. Like, that is probably when it's going to sink in. But even then, I don't even know if that's going to feel real. Either way, that's my Aaron Rodgers rant for 2 minutes. But there were some takeaways from the game. There were some positives, definitely some negatives. Not the prettiest football ever. A lot of backups. We'll see more starters as the preseason rolls on, and especially with the joint practices coming up this week against Carolina, and then next week at Florham Park against Tampa before they welcome the Buccaneers for a preseason game. They've got three obviously left: Panthers in Carolina, Buccaneers, and Giants, both at MetLife after that. But starting obviously Zach was the biggest storyline. He went 3 for 5 yesterday, 65 yards, rating of 104.2. The biggest play, 57 of those 65 yards came in one play. It was the big play to Malik Taylor. It was a good play for Zach. Threw a really nice throwing ball, 50-plus yards downfield. You saw the arm strength. You saw the confidence. You saw the pocket presence. It was all good. I thought Zach looked fine yesterday. He only played 11 snaps. 3 drives, 11 snaps. It wasn't a whole lot. He had Yeboah out in the flat. I like to see that because it was a nice, short, quick pass. It was got the ball, went to his read, found him. He was open, flat route, Yeboah, got the ball to a tight end. I thought that was a nice throw. Again, very small sample size, very small step. I'm not crowning Zach Wilson the greatest quarterback of all time because he hit a 4-yard flat route, but it was a nice play. And a lot of those plays he would miss. Now, there was a play to Xavier Gipson where he missed. He was pretty open. He threw it a little wide and high to Gipson. I would have liked to see him connect on that throw. I would like to see him maybe get one more drive. My overall assessment of Zach was I liked it. I thought it was good. Even the play where he tripped, it looked similar to, it reminded me a lot of the play last year against Philly when he obviously got hurt his knee, and forced him to miss the first 4 weeks of the season. But or the first 3 weeks, whenever it was, because he returned against Pittsburgh. I believe that was week 4 because they were 1-2. But either way, you get the point. It reminded me a lot of the Philly play. He ended up slipping, and he was trying to cut upfield. But even that play, even though he slipped, I was still glad to see him try and bounce it outside, get out of the pocket. Pocket was collapsing, stay calm. None of his reads were there, and run it. Instead of trying to force a pass across the middle, instead of trying to force a throw to somebody that's not open, or sitting there and taking a sack, which we've seen a lot of, or trying to roll out and, point to a guy downfield, get him downfield. He stayed calm. Nobody was there. He was patient. He tried to run. Unfortunately, he slipped. It's unfortunate. But I still thought that was a little progress because last year, in those situations when nobody's open, nothing's there on a 3rd and short, he would panic and either take a sack or force a ball to an area that the football should not be thrown. So that was something that you saw. I would have liked to see more of him, though. I think as a Jet fan, I think many Jet fans can agree. I don't want to sound negative, but he played 11 snaps. Not a whole lot you could take away from 11 snaps. I thought there was definitely more positives than negatives. I thought he looked fine, but it was 11 snaps. I would have liked to see at least one more drive. I mean, I don't understand quite why they seemed like they were such in a rush to put Tim Boyle in. We don't really need to see Tim Boyle and Chris Streveler. We really don't. What we want to see is Zach Wilson and see if he's making progress. And it's tough to see all the progress he made or he's making with only 11 snaps. But obviously the highlight was Malik Taylor. I thought there was a lot more good than there was bad. I would have liked to see more, but all in all, fine night for Zach Wilson. Izzy had a touchdown, which was good to see. Has had kind of a quiet camp where he hasn't had a lot of highlights. He's had a couple penalties, has had a couple drops, a couple fumbles, a couple rookie mistakes. Still kind of learning getting his way through the NFL so far. But seeing that touchdown last night, you saw him bounce outside, the explosiveness, 10 yards in the red zone, touchdown. You saw the potential. You saw what he can do. That was definitely a positive there for Izzy. All in all, not a whole lot in the run game. 23 carries for 53 yards. The biggest highlight was the Izzy touchdown. Again, biggest highlight receiving core-wise was Malik Taylor with the 57-yard reception from Zach. That was one of 2 targets. You saw Yeboah get involved a little bit. They tried to feature Jason Brownlee a lot. He had a couple drops. He had 2 catches. I like that they were trying to feature Brownlee. I like to see Brownlee getting a lot of reps. He was one of my main guys that I was watching for last night. Wasn't as good as he's been in training camp, but again, game situations, first NFL game of his career, bright lights come on, in game against another team. You're not going to be as perfect as you are in practice against your own team in training camp. So there's a little bit of a difference, but hopefully we continue to see more of Brownlee and continue to see him featured as much as he was last night, even more over his next 3 games, even when the starters get some reps coming up. And again, you'll see him more in the joint practices. I thought Xavier Gibson, he had the punt return he dropped and went out of bounds, but then he had a really nice kick return for 40-plus yards. I have it in my notes. It was a 45-yard kick return. So that was good to see from Xavier Gibson. He could have had a big play from Zach if Zach would have hit him, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. Offensive line was another big story last night, too. I had 2 main offensive line takeaways. I thought Joe Tippmann looked really good. Run, pass, I thought he looked fine. It was good to see that out of the rookie. There was a couple really nice Joe Tippmann plays. Rewatching the game today, looking back at some of the highlights, there was definitely a couple really nice Joe Tippmann blocks. And I think the grades came out last night for some of the players, and I believe Joe Tippmann had an overall grade of like 69, which some of the grades aren't great or aren't perfect, but I thought overall he looked good, and I think it was the run blocking grade that he was really good. It was 89.2 run block grade. So he was very good against the run. Run wasn't great because the offensive line wasn't great at blocking the run, but Tippmann was. So that was definitely a positive from the rookie. Continuing to see him in preseason is very important because he'll be basically sitting and watching this year, but continue to work his way up the depth chart. And then also Becton. That's a big story. Becton was good. He played 7 snaps. He did fine in those 7 snaps. He had a nice block on the play that Zach made the 53-yard or 57-yard completion to Malik Taylor. But the issue was his knee was still bothering him a little bit. He needed to be taken off. They still kind of put him on special teams a little bit. He said it was a little bit of the turf, but he's still working his way back. I'm not panicking. I'm not giving up on Becton. I want to make that clear. But there's definitely a concern with Mekhi Becton. Can he play consistently this entire season, and can you rely on him at the tackle spot? That's still a big question. Can this guy go out there, and I'm rooting for Becton. We all want to see Becton do well, but can he go out there and give you 15 games of good football? Or is by week 2, is his knee not going to be holding up and he's going to need breaks middle of the game? Because that just can't happen. Like, can he put together a full season? And he kind of talked about last night in his press conference where, he's going to still have pain. It's just the way it is. But it's how he manages it. And it's how he works through it. And making sure that knowing what kind of pain is normal and what pain isn't. And making sure that he can work through that pain and continuing to build confidence and continuing to build trust in that knee. But it's still a little bit of a concern. He was good, but 7 snaps when he was supposed to play 20 to 25 is a lot less. It's just, can he stay healthy? Like, can you rely on Becton to go out there and play 15 games at least and play every snap every game and be reliable? Right now, it's definitely in question. But I'm rooting for him, and I want to see him do well. And I still have hope, but there is concerns. So that's my takeaway with Becton. But he was good. I mean, he was fine. He was fine in the plays that he was out there. Will McDonald looked great. He had the one great spin move to get a pressure. He had 2 pressures last night that forced incompletions. Once he puts on NFL size, he's going to be dominant. He already is really good. He's so athletic, very explosive. But I think even once he puts on more NFL size, he'll be even better. Jamien Sherwood and Chaz Surratt both forced the fumble, so that was good. Chaz Surratt also had an interception, played the ball really, really well, also had a pass breakup. So Surratt, I was happy to see that because I was a little bit worried of the linebacker depth. I thought Sherwood, he played well, maybe a couple miss routes to tackles, but the forced fumble was big. The Jets recovered. Javelin Guidry recovered it. But seeing that from Sherwood, seeing the Jets force some turnovers there was very important because this was a team that didn't force much turnovers last year, and it was nice to see some luck go our way. We forced 13 fumbles last year, only recovered 4 of them. And, again, I went into this, and I said in my preview on Wednesday on In the Trench with Gangrene, I talked about the linebacker depth being something I was looking at. Zaire Barnes, I thought, played well. I thought Chaz Surratt played well. Nasruddin left with an injury. Sherwood looked good. So outside of, Quincy Williams, C.J. Mosley, and Sherwood, I think there was definitely some concerns. But last night they played well, and you want to continue to see them play well because there are a lot of concerns with the linebacker depth. But last night, some of those concerns were a little bit lifted with the way they played, some of those guys. Bryce Huff, he had a sack. I mean, Bryce Huff's so good. Why is he playing so late in these preseason games? I don't quite know why. I wish I would like to know. I want to know. We saw this last year, too, with him playing late in preseason games. I just feel like sometimes at times maybe the Jets misutilize him a little bit. There was a handful of games last year where he'd only get like 12 snaps. And you come away and he'd be one of the main stories, even though he played 12 snaps because he made a couple big plays in those 12 snaps. Like the minimal reps he gets, he's really good. I don't know what more he has to show to get consistent playing time, but I definitely hope that Bryce Huff does still have a future here. I mean, I know he's liked the tweet about something about his playing time, but like he's so good. And his coaching staff, I got to recognize that and realize like they got to play this guy. Not like they got to play him more in the regular season. Like you play him in the preseason the entire game. Do this in the regular season. He's just a whole nother piece to this edge that's so good. So you saw more Bryce Huff. As I mentioned, Will McDonald. Saw some Michael Clemens. Had a little bit of a run stuff, him and Brandon Eccles. Saw an interception from Chaz Surratt. Tony Adams didn't play. Obviously, none of their starting corners played. Greg the Leg was 3 for 3. He had a 54-yarder, a 53-yarder, and a 44-yarder. So he's in midseason form. Greg the Leg's awesome. It's awesome having trust in a kicker. The Jets haven't had that in a very long time. Like last year we did, but prior to that, it was so hard for the Jets to find a kicker. It's nice now that we finally got a kicker in Greg the Leg. So definitely good. Good day for him. So all in all, definitely some positive takeaways. Definitely some things that, there was a lot of penalties. I think there was like 22 penalties total. I think the Jets had 12 and the Browns had 11, which is typical backups preseason game, but there was a lot of penalties last night. But either way, it's backup. Score doesn't matter. The main thing is come out of it healthy. Jets, for the most part, did. I don't think Nasruddin's injury is anything major, especially Becton coming out of it healthy, even though he only played 7 snaps. Still trying to gain some trust and and still trying to gain more trust and endurance in that knee. We'll see how it all ends up playing out once the season comes. Luckily, it's early August. It's August 4th. We still got a whole month and like a week until August starts up. Or until the season starts up, I should say. So, anyway, baseball for tonight. You got Yankees, Astros. Yankees got Luis Severino on the mound. He's 2-5 with a 7.49 ERA. Astros have Hunter Brown on the mound. He's 7-7 with a 4.12 ERA. So, I don't like our chances with Sevy on the mound, unfortunately. There, for the Mets, it's David Peterson versus Dean Kramer in Baltimore Camden Yards. David Peterson's 3-7 with a 5.29 ERA. Dean Kramer is 10-4 with a 4.66 ERA. He'll go for the Orioles. So that's your New York baseball tonight. Yankees, Astros tonight into Sunday. Mets, Orioles starting up tonight. That'll also be over the weekend as well. So you got some baseball on. And, other than that, enjoy your weekend. I'll have more training camp updates up on my In the Trench with Gangrene channel. I also plan on getting a video up on Bubbs Talking Bronx Bombers, talking all things New York Yankees on there. So stay tuned for those on Apple Podcasts. Obviously, training camp videos will be up on Saturday and Sunday. I'll try to get them up on Saturday and Sunday, because the Jets have day 11 tomorrow and then day 12 on Sunday. If you're going out to training camp on Saturday and Sunday, enjoy it. Have fun. And, Jets training camp continues. Giants as well. So, got a lot going on this weekend in the football and the baseball world. And then next week, another week, more joint practices for the Jets. Another preseason game next Saturday. Football will really start up in the preseason. So, we got a lot more content coming your way. Enjoy your weekend. I will see you all back here on Monday. As always, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.